In the windswept steppes of Mongolia, where the horizon stretches unbroken under a sky that seems to hold both promise and menace, a boy was born who would one day command the might of the world. He arrived in a land of fierce clans and relentless survival, where the very earth seemed to challenge those who dared to tame it. Born as Temujin, he came into a world defined by the endless tussle for power, honor, and survival. From the first, he knew that strength alone was never enough. Cunning, patience, and loyalty would shape the destiny of those who sought to rise above the others. His early years were marked by hardship and betrayal, lessons engraved into his character by the cruelty of kinship rivalries and the harshness of the land. The blood of ambition ran thick, and it coursed through the veins of those who sought dominion over the steppes. It was here, amid frozen winters and scorching summers, that the first seeds of a general's mind took root. Temujin learned to read the intentions of friends and foes alike, to anticipate the shifts of alliances and the betrayals hidden in whispered promises. Each encounter, each skirmish, each fleeting victory or humiliating defeat shaped him. By the time he was a young man, the boy who had once clutched at survival in the shadow of his father's death had begun to wield strategy like a blade, subtle yet unyielding. The tribes of Mongolia were fractured, their rivalries echoing across the endless plains. Yet Temujin envisioned a unity beyond the petty quarrels of bloodlines. He saw a world where loyalty was earned through merit rather than birthright, where skill and courage could shape the order of life and death. This radical vision became his guiding principle, attracting followers who recognized in him a leader unlike any other. Unlike the scattered chieftains whose authority rested on fear or inherited claim, Temujin earned allegiance through justice, protection, and rewards for loyalty. His early campaigns were small yet decisive, carefully calibrated to build both his forces and his reputation. He learned to move swiftly, to strike where enemies were weakest, to use the terrain as an ally, and to cultivate intelligence networks that allowed him to predict his opponents' moves before they themselves understood them. From these beginnings, the blueprint of a military genius emerged, not merely a warrior, but a strategist whose mind was always several steps ahead. As he grew in influence, the alliances he forged were not mere convenience but instruments of power that would redefine the Mongol world. Temujin's ability to integrate conquered or allied tribes into a disciplined and loyal fighting force was unprecedented. He replaced tribal hierarchies with meritocratic structures, ensuring that competence and loyalty dictated command rather than lineage. This created a sense of purpose and shared identity among disparate groups who might otherwise have remained bitter rivals. When he confronted betrayal, he responded not only with force, but with calculation, demonstrating that cruelty was a tool, not a vice, wielded to consolidate power and maintain order. In these formative years, his reputation grew, whispered across the steppes like the wind through the grass. By the time he declared himself Genghis Khan, the universal ruler, he had transformed from a fugitive youth into the unifying force of the Mongolian tribes. But the title was not a mere claim. It was the culmination of decades of strategy, diplomacy, and relentless ambition. Genghis Khan's genius lay not just in assembling warriors, but in understanding the deeper rhythm of warfare. He observed, adapted, and innovated in ways that defied the conventional strategies of his time. His cavalry was not merely a unit of riders, but a highly coordinated instrument capable of lightning strikes, feigned retreats and encirclements that bewildered enemies. Communication and coordination were his secret weapons, achieved through a system of mounted couriers who could relay orders across vast distances with unmatched speed. Every horse, every archer, every scout was integrated into a larger design, functioning as a single organism under his command. While his contemporaries relied on brute force and static fortifications, Genghis Khan relied on speed, flexibility, and psychological mastery. He understood that terror itself was a weapon, that reputation could dismantle opposition before a battle even began. News of his ruthlessness and strategic brilliance traveled faster than his armies, often compelling surrender without a fight. Yet for all the fear he inspired, he also earned loyalty through fairness and pragmatism, ensuring that his subjects, conquered or allied, saw him as a ruler of destiny rather than mere oppression. Even as he prepared for campaigns beyond the steppes, Genghis Khan's strategies revealed an understanding of logistics that was centuries ahead of his time. He organized supplies, maintained reserves, and ensured that his forces could survive harsh winters and scorching summers alike. He adapted enemy technologies, integrating them into his own operations, whether siege engines, captured infantry, or specialized weaponry. Every conquest became an opportunity to refine tactics, improve mobility, and expand intelligence networks. This relentless pursuit of efficiency transformed what might have been chaotic tribal raids into a disciplined, unstoppable force. Battles were not won by chance, but by meticulous preparation and adaptability. Yet even the most careful planner was tempered by instinct. Genghis Khan's ability to read the battlefield, to exploit hesitation, to anticipate betrayal, elevated him from commander to legend. His vision was not simply conquest for its own sake, but the creation of an empire built on order, loyalty, and fear balanced with reward. From the first unsteady steps of Temujin in the frozen steppes to the disciplined legions he commanded as Genghis Khan, a transformation occurred that would shape the destiny of continents. The vastness of the steppe had been his training ground, but it was the campaigns beyond Mongolia that would cement Genghis Khan's name in history. He began with the neighboring Jin dynasty in northern China, a kingdom fortified with walls, armies, and centuries of established power. To many it was an impossible target, yet Genghis Khan saw opportunity where others saw only obstacles. His first strategy was intelligence. Spies and scouts moved ahead of his armies, mapping terrain, assessing supply lines, and uncovering weak points in the enemy's command. With this knowledge, he orchestrated assaults not as mere clashes of arms, but as precise operations designed to exploit every vulnerability. His forces moved with uncanny speed, often appearing where they were least expected. Fortifications, once considered impregnable, fell not just to brute force, but to a combination of siege technology, psychological warfare, and deception. The Mongol army's reputation for invincibility was no accident. It was carefully crafted through careful timing, coordination, and relentless pressure. In battle, Genghis Khan's mastery was unparalleled. He perfected the art of the feigned retreat, a maneuver that lured enemy forces into ambushes, only to have hidden units encircle and destroy them. This tactic relied on discipline and trust among his soldiers, a level of cohesion rare in any army of the time. Cavalry units, light and swift, acted as both spear and shield, striking suddenly and disappearing before retaliation could form. Archers fired with unmatched precision, often from horseback, creating a storm of arrows that could shatter enemy lines before they even touched the Mongol forces. Yet even amidst this brilliance, Genghis Khan was never reckless. Every attack was measured, every advance calculated. When cities resisted, he combined fear and diplomacy, offering leniency to those who surrendered and ensuring that tales of merciless retribution spread to dissuade others from defiance. His reputation became a weapon in itself, a psychological force that often achieved victory without a single sword being drawn. Beyond raw military skill, Genghis Khan understood the importance of organization and logistics. Unlike many contemporaries whose armies faltered from hunger or exhaustion, the Mongol forces were structured for endurance. Horses were rotated to maintain speed, supply caravans moved in tandem, and mobile kitchens ensured the troops remained fed during campaigns that spanned months or years. He developed a messenger system that allowed him to transmit orders across hundreds of miles almost instantaneously, an innovation that kept his army coordinated in ways unimaginable to opponents. Every unit had a clear role, every soldier knew his place, and every action fed into a larger strategy. Even in retreat or defeat, Mongol forces were capable of rapid reorganization, turning potential disaster into opportunity. The combination of discipline, intelligence, and mobility allowed Genghis Khan to strike vast territories with precision, a capability that set him far above any other commander of his era. Genghis Khan's campaigns were also shaped by his understanding of human nature. He observed that fear, hope, and loyalty could be as decisive as swords and arrows. When a city surrendered, he often spared its inhabitants, integrating craftsmen, engineers, and scholars into his growing empire. Conquered soldiers were not always executed. Many were absorbed into his forces, trained and used to strengthen the Mongol army. He recognized that knowledge, skill, and specialized talent were as valuable as raw manpower. Conversely, those who resisted faced swift and brutal punishment, creating a network of deterrence that minimized prolonged conflict. This dual approach, merging terror with opportunity, ensured that his empire expanded rapidly without collapsing under rebellion or attrition. By balancing ruthlessness with pragmatism, he created not just an army, but a system capable of sustained conquest. The campaigns into Central Asia further showcased Genghis Khan's tactical genius. The Khwarezmian Empire, sprawling and wealthy, believed itself secure behind fortified cities and vast armies. Yet Genghis Khan approached the conquest with meticulous planning, dividing his forces to strike simultaneously across multiple fronts. He employed feigned withdrawals, lightning-fast cavalry charges, and psychological manipulation, creating chaos in the enemy ranks long before direct combat occurred. Every city that fell provided not only plunder, but intelligence, recruits, and materials for further campaigns. Rivers, mountains, and deserts, often seen as obstacles, became tools in his strategy. By understanding terrain as an extension of his army, Genghis Khan transformed natural challenges into tactical advantages. Even the harshest conditions, the scorching heat of the deserts or the freezing winds of mountain passes, did not slow him. His troops adapted, endured, and prevailed, turning adversity into a weapon against those less prepared. Yet it was not only speed and innovation that defined his brilliance, it was adaptability. He learned from every encounter, incorporating enemy techniques into his own strategies. Siege engines captured from the Chinese were deployed in Central Asia. Local cavalry tactics were refined and perfected for use against other opponents. He understood that rigidity was the enemy of victory. By blending the strengths of conquered peoples with his own disciplined forces, he constantly evolved, creating an army that could confront any threat, anywhere. Even logistical setbacks were opportunities for improvisation, as Genghis Khan's forces used ingenuity to overcome rivers, fortifications, and supply shortages. His campaigns were as much lessons in anticipation and problem-solving as they were in combat. Each battle became a classroom, each conquest a blueprint for future victories. The human cost of his campaigns was immense, yet it was part of the strategy that allowed Genghis Khan to move faster than any opponent could respond. Cities that resisted were destroyed, their populations punished, ensuring that news of his efficiency and ruthlessness traveled far beyond the battlefield. Yet within this harshness lay calculated mercy. Skilled artisans, administrators, and soldiers were spared, often contributing to the very empire that had conquered them. By combining fear, discipline, and integration, Genghis Khan created a system that allowed conquest to sustain itself rather than crumble under the weight of its own violence. In every campaign, in every maneuver, the genius of Genghis Khan shone through, not merely as a warrior, but as a strategist who saw the battlefield as a dynamic, living entity, one that could be studied, manipulated, and ultimately mastered. From the first clashes beyond Mongolia to the sprawling conquests across Central Asia and northern China, Genghis Khan demonstrated that warfare was an art form. It was not enough to possess strength. Victory required speed, intelligence, adaptability, and an acute understanding of human psychology. His forces became extensions of his mind, capable of responding to circumstances with precision and creativity. Through his campaigns, he reshaped the map of Eurasia, breaking the old orders and creating a new paradigm of power. The Mongol horsemen, once scattered tribesmen, had become the most efficient, adaptable, and feared army the world had ever seen. In the story of Genghis Khan, the steppe-born boy who had learned patience and cunning in childhood had emerged as a master of strategy, a general whose vision extended far beyond the limits of any battlefield, crafting an empire that would echo through the centuries. The battlefield had revealed Genghis Khan's genius as a commander, but it was the careful architecture of the empire itself that transformed his victories into enduring power. Conquest alone could not sustain dominion over the vast and diverse lands he now ruled. From the frozen steppes of Mongolia to the fertile valleys of China and the deserts of Central Asia, he faced populations of different tongues, faiths, and traditions. To govern them required more than fear. It demanded structure, clarity, and a vision of order. He established a system where laws were codified, known as the Yasa, a set of regulations designed to ensure loyalty, justice, and efficiency across his domains. These laws transcended tribal custom, creating a unifying framework that bound together nomads, city dwellers, and conquered peoples alike. Justice was swift, impartial, and above all consistent, sending a clear message. The strength of the empire rested not only on swords, but on rules that even the powerful could not ignore. Genghis Khan's genius extended to social integration, recognizing that a stable empire required harnessing the talents of those he had conquered. Artisans, engineers, administrators, and scholars were often spared, relocated, and employed to strengthen his governance and military. Those who had once been his enemies became essential contributors to the empire's efficiency. Cities were reconstructed, trade networks revived, and infrastructure expanded under his direction. Roads were maintained, communication routes established, and the flow of information ensured that decrees, intelligence, and orders traveled as quickly as his armies. By creating a reliable system of governance, Genghis Khan transformed the chaos of conquest into a coherent empire, one in which commerce, law, and culture could flourish under the shadow of his authority. Religious tolerance was another instrument of unity. In lands as diverse as Persia, China, and the steppes, multiple faiths intersected, each with deeply entrenched communities. Genghis Khan recognized that imposing a single religion would fracture his empire. Instead, he allowed people to practice their beliefs freely, provided they did not threaten the stability of his rule. Buddhist monks, Muslim scholars, Christian priests, and shamanic practitioners all found protection under his laws. This tolerance not only prevented rebellion, but also encouraged loyalty, as populations saw that his authority was guided by reason and pragmatism rather than dogma. Knowledge and cultural exchange flowed along the empire's arteries, and the movement of scholars, traders, and diplomats created an unprecedented era of connectivity. Trade, in particular, became the lifeblood of Genghis Khan's statecraft. By securing the Silk Road and other major trade routes, he facilitated the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies across continents. Merchants traveled safely under the empire's protection, and markets thrived in cities that had once been vulnerable to raiding. The Mongol postal system, known as the Yam, allowed for rapid communication across thousands of miles, ensuring that information reached him and his governors quickly. This network made the empire not only militarily formidable, but economically dynamic, capable of supporting armies and populations alike. Goods, technologies, and innovations moved along these routes, knitting together a vast mosaic of cultures under a single political and logistical system. Administration was as innovative as military conquest. Genghis Khan divided his empire into units based on population and loyalty rather than tribal affiliation, creating a hierarchy that rewarded merit. Commanders were chosen for skill, intelligence, and trustworthiness, ensuring that power remained effective and accountable. Taxes were standardized, collected efficiently, and often reinvested into infrastructure or defense, creating a self-sustaining system that did not rely solely on plunder. He understood that an empire built purely on conquest would crumble without the glue of organization, and so he ensured that the machinery of governance functioned as smoothly as his armies. Communication between provinces, the central authority, and military units was constant and precise, allowing for both rapid response to crises and coordinated long-term planning. Intelligence gathering, which had made him a master of war, became equally essential in administration. Spies and envoys reported on unrest, local disputes, and the movements of foreign powers. This network allowed Genghis Khan to anticipate rebellion, mediate conflicts, and respond before problems escalated. Diplomats were dispatched to foreign courts, establishing both fear and respect for the Mongol state. By blending surveillance, communication, and diplomacy, he created a government that was simultaneously decentralized and tightly controlled, empowering local administrators while maintaining ultimate authority. The balance between autonomy and oversight became a defining feature of his governance. Even culture and law were harnessed to create cohesion. Genghis Khan emphasized literacy and record-keeping, encouraging the documentation of events, decrees, and genealogies. This not only preserved the memory of the empire but allowed for greater consistency in administration and succession planning. By merging Mongol traditions with the bureaucratic practices of conquered peoples, he created an innovative hybrid system that combined flexibility with rigidity where it mattered most. These measures were not abstract. They had tangible effects on stability, security, and loyalty. Across the vast empire, from the steppes to the cities, people began to understand the logic of Genghis Khan's rule. Strength backed by law order, enforced through fairness and pragmatism, and opportunity offered even to those who had once been enemies. Education, meritocracy, and opportunity for advancement were part of the same vision. Talented individuals could rise through the ranks of administration, the military, or commerce regardless of birth. This was revolutionary in a world where aristocracy and lineage usually dictated status. By tying loyalty to competence rather than heritage, Genghis Khan built a resilient bureaucracy that could function across diverse cultures and languages. Ambition became a tool to reinforce the state rather than undermine it, and this dynamic created a sense of purpose and possibility for those within the empire. People could envision a future shaped by their own skills, tethered to the larger stability of Mongol authority. Even the integration of conquered populations was strategic. Genghis Khan relocated entire communities when needed, dispersing potentially rebellious groups while simultaneously spreading knowledge, technology, and skilled labor throughout the empire. Artisans from Persia might find themselves in China, soldiers from the steppes guarding cities far from home, and scholars traveling to advise distant governors. This mobility ensured that the empire's strengths were shared and reinforced rather than concentrated, preventing localized power from undermining central authority. The flow of knowledge, technology, and culture was as deliberate as the movement of armies, each reinforcing the other in the creation of a durable empire. Through governance, Genghis Khan transformed conquest into civilization. The same mind that had orchestrated lightning-fast cavalry maneuvers now orchestrated the administration of a continent-spanning state. Efficiency, loyalty, law, and cultural integration became as crucial as skill in battle, and the empire's durability reflected his understanding that true power extended beyond the sword. By establishing systems that balanced fear, reward, and opportunity, he ensured that his empire would endure far beyond his own lifetime. Cities thrived under protection, trade flourished, and information flowed with unprecedented speed, creating a foundation upon which his successors could build. The genius of Genghis Khan was not limited to his ability to conquer. It was equally evident in his ability to govern, integrate, and innovate, turning a fractured collection of tribes into a coherent, resilient empire capable of withstanding the pressures of geography, culture, and time. The power of Genghis Khan was not only measured in armies or territories, but in the minds of those who lived under, near, or opposed him. Across Eurasia, the mere mention of his name could paralyze kingdoms, provoke surrender, and shape decisions before a sword was drawn. He understood that perception itself was a battlefield. Stories of his ruthlessness spread ahead of his campaigns, amplified by messengers, fleeing survivors, and emissaries who spoke both fear and awe. Yet this fear was never random or gratuitous. It was carefully calibrated, designed to compel compliance while minimizing unnecessary expenditure of resources. Entire cities would capitulate rather than face the storm of Mongol conquest, and in doing so, preserved themselves while reinforcing his reputation. In this way, Genghis Khan's psychological strategy became as essential to his success as cavalry maneuvers or siege engines. At the same time, he cultivated diplomacy with a subtle hand, recognizing that strength alone could not secure the complex web of alliances and trade relationships his empire required. Envoys traveled to distant courts with gifts, threats, and demands, establishing Mongol authority while respecting local customs. He engaged rulers not merely as adversaries, but as participants in a larger network of power. Those who allied with him were rewarded, integrated, and sometimes elevated. Those who resisted faced swift and overwhelming reprisal. Yet even in the administration of fear, there was a method that balanced cruelty with pragmatism. It was this understanding of human psychology, of loyalty, obedience, and the interplay of hope and terror that allowed Genghis Khan to control vast populations across diverse cultures without stretching his empire into chaos. The Mongol approach to leadership was revolutionary in its combination of meritocracy, loyalty, and vision. Leaders under Genghis Khan were chosen for talent rather than bloodline, ensuring that competence, courage, and intelligence determined success. This principle extended not only to generals and administrators, but to scouts, artisans, and merchants. People recognized that loyalty was rewarded and betrayal punished with equal certainty. By embedding this logic into the culture of the empire, Genghis Khan created a self-reinforcing system where ambition, skill, and service aligned with the stability and expansion of his rule. Even in the most remote corners of the empire, the expectation of fairness, efficiency, and accountability shaped behavior and fostered order. It was a psychological architecture as meticulous as the laws and military codes he had established. Cultural influence was another tool of his legacy. Conquered peoples brought knowledge, art, and innovation into the Mongol fold. Cities became melting pots of ideas, languages, and techniques. Scholars, engineers, and merchants traveled along the empire's roads, carrying inventions, agricultural methods, and artistic traditions from one region to another. This exchange was facilitated by Genghis Khan's protection and oversight, creating a network that spread not only goods, but knowledge across continents. The Mongol Empire became a conduit for cultural synthesis, connecting the Far East to the Middle East, and shaping the world in ways that would reverberate long after his death. Even as his armies destroyed, they also rebuilt. Even as fear spread, so too did opportunity for those willing to adapt. Genghis Khan's psychological strategy extended into his treatment of enemies. He studied the patterns of resistance, the ways fear and hope could influence decision-making. Cities that resisted could expect devastation, while those that surrendered found inclusion and sometimes advancement. Entire populations learned to negotiate their survival based on reputation and behavior, shaping the dynamics of diplomacy for generations. Even foreign rulers understood that appeasement could be as powerful as confrontation, and treaties often reflected a careful balance of intimidation and incentive. By mastering the psychology of fear and trust, Genghis Khan created a framework in which warfare, governance, and diplomacy operated as interconnected mechanisms rather than isolated events. This legacy of perception influenced leadership beyond the Mongol Empire. Kings and generals observed the power of reputation, the utility of speed and adaptability, and the psychological calculus of victory and submission. Genghis Khan's campaigns became case studies in the art of managing not only armies, but the minds of men and women who inhabited the territories of conquest. His understanding of communication, both overt and implied, transformed warfare into a dialogue of signals, messages, and choices. A city could surrender simply by hearing rumors of his approach, and armies could collapse not from strength alone, but from anticipation of his tactics. The perception of omnipresence, of being able to strike anywhere at any time, magnified his reach far beyond the actual numbers of soldiers under his command. Fear, however, was never blind. It was tempered by law, reward, and integration, creating a paradoxical loyalty among subjects. People learned that submission could yield opportunity, that service could bring status, and that expertise was valued even in those once considered enemies. Artisans, traders, and scholars found protection under Mongol rule, and through them, knowledge and culture flourished. The empire became a living testament to the interplay of force and intellect, violence and pragmatism, terror and benevolence. By understanding and manipulating perception, Genghis Khan transcended the limitations of brute power, crafting an authority that was both immediate and enduring. His influence on leadership extended even to military culture. Generals who studied the Mongols understood the importance of intelligence, flexibility, and psychological impact. Speed, mobility, and communication became as essential as numbers or armor. The principles he applied on the battlefield, anticipation, adaptation, and coordination, translated directly into governance, diplomacy, and cultural administration. In every aspect of his empire, the mind of Genghis Khan shaped outcomes, proving that conquest without comprehension was fleeting, but conquest guided by strategy and perception could endure. Even centuries later, the image of Genghis Khan inspired both terror and respect across civilizations. From Asia to Europe, rulers cited his campaigns as lessons in the consequences of defiance and the benefits of organization and loyalty. His name became a benchmark for leadership, a symbol of the fusion of intellect and force, vision and decisiveness. Through fear, diplomacy, and the careful orchestration of reputation, he left a psychological imprint as powerful as any army he commanded. Across generations, historians, generals, and storytellers would return to the example of Genghis Khan, studying the mind that could move men, shape nations, and bend perception itself to serve the sweep of a single will. In understanding his psychological and cultural legacy, one sees that the genius of Genghis Khan was not limited to the battlefield or the halls of administration. It resided in his ability to shape the thoughts, choices, and beliefs of entire populations, to integrate diversity into a coherent order, and to balance fear with opportunity in a way that strengthened rather than undermined his power. The empire he built was as much an achievement of intellect as of arms, a testament to the fact that leadership is measured not only by victories, but by the enduring imprint it leaves on those who live under it. Through fear, wisdom, and strategic perception, Genghis Khan became more than a conqueror. He became a force of history, reshaping the world in ways that would echo far beyond his lifetime. Genghis Khan's death did not mark the end of his influence. It was in many ways the beginning of a legacy that would ripple across centuries. The empire he had built, forged from the unity of disparate tribes, stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea, encompassing diverse cultures, languages, and religions. His successors inherited not only vast territories, but an intricate framework of governance, logistics, and military strategy, a system designed to endure far beyond the lifespan of any single ruler. The empire remained connected through roads, couriers, and administration, and the principles of meritocracy, law, and integration continued to shape societies long after his passing. In this way, Genghis Khan became immortal, not merely as a figure in history, but as a force embedded in the structures, practices, and consciousness of civilizations. The echoes of his conquests influenced the political and military strategies of nations that would rise centuries later. European, Middle Eastern, and Asian leaders studied the Mongol campaigns, recognizing the power of mobility, intelligence, and psychological warfare. The very concept of rapid, coordinated maneuvers across great distances owed much to the systems he had perfected. Generals learned that speed could outweigh numbers, that information could be more decisive than brute strength, and that reputation could preempt conflict. These lessons shaped the evolution of armies and states, from the battlefield tactics of the Renaissance to the strategies of modern warfare. Genghis Khan's genius was not confined to his era. It became a touchstone for understanding the dynamics of power, control, and influence. Yet his legacy was not only martial. The empire fostered unprecedented cultural and commercial exchange. The Silk Road, once a perilous journey across deserts and mountains, became a conduit for trade, technology, and ideas. Goods, innovations, and philosophies flowed freely, linking civilizations that might otherwise have remained isolated. From papermaking and printing to astronomical knowledge and medical practices, the cross-pollination of cultures facilitated by the Mongol Empire transformed the intellectual and economic landscape of Eurasia. Cities thrived under Mongol oversight, protected from raiders and connected through trade networks, creating a period of relative stability that enabled both local prosperity and long-distance commerce. In this sense, Genghis Khan's influence extended far beyond conquest, shaping the interconnected world we recognize today. The social innovations he introduced also left a lasting mark. By promoting merit over birth, Genghis Khan undermined rigid hierarchies, demonstrating that talent and loyalty could shape power. This principle of meritocracy, embedded in military and administrative systems, empowered individuals and created opportunities previously unavailable in strictly hereditary societies. His policies encouraged integration, cooperation, and adaptation, allowing diverse populations to function as part of a cohesive whole. These lessons in governance, balancing authority, law, and incentive, continue to resonate in the structures of modern administration, illustrating the enduring relevance of his approach to leadership. Even the perception of Genghis Khan's ruthlessness had long-term consequences. The psychological power he wielded through fear, reputation, and strategic intimidation redefined the relationship between conqueror and conquered. His campaigns became cautionary tales, shaping the decisions of rulers who recognized the costs of defiance. Yet within this fear was a paradoxical lesson. Strength alone could not sustain authority. Intelligence, fairness, and vision were equally essential. The duality of his approach, combining terror with opportunity, destruction with integration, remains a model of strategic thinking that transcends time. Leadership, he demonstrated, is as much about shaping the minds of others as it is about controlling territory or commanding armies. Modern historians and scholars continue to grapple with the scale of his achievements. Estimates suggest that the Mongol conquests directly or indirectly affected tens of millions of people, altering demographic, political, and cultural landscapes. His campaigns reshaped borders, toppled empires, and connected regions in ways that would influence trade, diplomacy, and warfare for centuries. Yet beyond the numbers, the essence of his legacy lies in the systems he created. Systems that combined mobility, intelligence, law, and meritocracy into a coherent and enduring structure. These systems influenced not only his immediate successors, but the development of global civilizations long afterward, providing a blueprint for both power and governance. In the modern imagination, Genghis Khan remains a complex figure, simultaneously admired for his vision and strategic brilliance, and feared for the devastation he wrought. Yet this duality is precisely the measure of his genius. He understood that leadership required both intellect and decisiveness, that authority demanded respect as well as fear, and that conquest was only meaningful when transformed into order and stability. His life illustrates the interplay of patience, ambition, and adaptability, showing that true greatness arises not from singular victories, but from the creation of enduring structures, capable of withstanding the uncertainties of time and circumstance. Ultimately, Genghis Khan's story is a testament to the power of vision guided by intelligence, discipline, and adaptability. From a boy born into the harsh steppes, navigating betrayal and hardship, to a conqueror whose influence reshaped continents, his life demonstrates the possibilities inherent in strategic thinking, foresight, and leadership. He proved that an individual, equipped with insight and perseverance, can alter the course of history. His empire, though transformed and fragmented after his death, set the stage for global connectivity, cross-cultural exchange, and political innovation. It is this combination of conquest, governance, and psychological insight that secures Genghis Khan's place not merely as a warrior, but as one of history's greatest generals and state builders. Even today, in the sweep of the vast Eurasian landscape, from the windswept steppes to the thriving cities once under his dominion, the shadow of Genghis Khan lingers. Roads, trade routes, administrative systems, and the very imagination of leadership bear the imprint of his vision. He was a master of both force and intellect, of fear and incentive, of strategy and law, a figure who transcended the boundaries of his time to leave a legacy that endures in the very fabric of history. Through his campaigns, his governance, and the psychological mastery with which he wielded power, Genghis Khan became more than a conqueror. He became an architect of civilization, a general whose genius continues to instruct, inspire, and caution the world centuries after his death.